CPI benchmarks, I think especially for developers that are moving in to this realm of things as well, right? Like one thing, I think one insight was regarding that iOS in Japan has one of the highest CPI benchmarks, but still it is the top 10 countries by ad spend in 23, right? So this was a very, very unique insight for us. I mean, we have seen this trend because usually advertisers like to pump money in tier one with US, UK, and all these countries. But kind of, I did see one more report that said that I think in 2024, almost 64% of the ad spend revenue will revolve around the Asia Pacific market.
Hi everyone, this is Roman from Tangent, and today we're discussing how to advertise hyper and hybrid casual games. And I'm joined by Fahim. Fahim, please introduce yourself.
Hey everyone, nice to meet you. Thank you for having me, Roman. This is Faheem on behalf of App Samurai. I work at App Samurai as the director of business, and App Samurai is an ad tech startup based out of New York.
Sweet. Fahim, I saw you published an ebook on hybrid casual games. So this is basically why you're here. So I bet you have a ton of expertise. So maybe you can tell us, for the starters, what is a hybrid casual?
Sure thing, Roman. So one thing that you mentioned, right? So hybrid casual is something that has been making a lot of noise for the past year and a half, before which the whole world was revolving around hyper casual mid-core games at max as well. But of course, as you see, over time, the industry is constantly evolving. And one thing that came with the evolution was that, while hyper casuals were enjoying extreme popularity, they were easy to make, easy to use and market. One thing that was kind of an issue was that, the retention rate was something that was a big problem. So over time, the LTVs and the retentions were very, very low. So the idea was, hey, let's acquire users at a cheaper cost with, limited LTV. But then with all these challenges, right, how can we increase, the monetization of it? As a game developer, how do I earn more revenue without losing the player? So you have hyper casual player that just plays for fun. You have a core game, mid-core game player that is a hardcore fan, right? Something in between, right? When you merge both of them, you have hybrid casual. So you would see approximately 40 to 50% of this hybrid casual revenue being generated via in-app purchase. So still ads holds almost 50% of the revenue via ads. The idea was make a game that is not as complex as a mid-core, so the users that were fan of hyper casual games can still play it, but at the same time add layers like, social charts, leaderboards, in-app purchases. So this would make the user come back to the game again and again, and hence the core game or the mid-core game user would also start playing this game. So you would still acquire a user that would basically merge between these two genres, and at the end of the day you would have higher retention rates and higher LTVs.
Yeah, makes sense. What about the proportions of in-app purchases and ad revenue? You mentioned like 50-50, but from your
Yeah.
experience.
So even on the ebook where we evaluated over 100 different hybrid casual games, what we saw was on average 40 to 50% was an ideal scenario for IAPs. A lot of them kind of wanted to keep it less than 50%, just to kind of go into that hybrid casual setup game of things as well. So 40 to 50% is what we'd say as an ideal Roman. But then you'd also have apps that would do an exact 50-50 split. But the ideal version is 40% IAP, 60% in-app ads, so that the user that won't do the in-app purchase can still contribute to the ad revenue by watching a rewarded video, banner, etc.
Yeah, that's a cool insight because like I see a lot of hyper casual developers starting to do like hybrid, and the in-app purchases is the most challenging part, right? Like of course it's challenging for any game, but we've seen the hyper casual developers for whom it was like so easy to get all of those ad revenue, and all of a sudden like the ad revenue has shrinked, right?
True, exactly. And with all these privacy regulations coming in, with the Google sandbox
Yeah.
coming in, all these advertising is kind of becoming a challenge these days. And when you pump into these IAPs, it's more risk-free, and you can place a bet on, hey, if the user is purchasing something, they will be a repetitive user. And as they keep coming back to the app, it contributes directly to your retention rate, LTVs, and overall revenue.
Right. Maybe can you share another insight from your ebook just as a teaser for everyone here?
Sure thing. One more thing that we did see was in terms of the CPI. So over time, as you can see for the hyper casual games with all these privacy regulations, the CPMs and the CPIs were increasing, right? So this was a challenge on why hyper casual developers started to seek other monetization channels. For example, with hybrid casual, although they are willing to pay a premium CPI, so of course, as you can imagine, since these are kind of mid-core games combined as well, so the developers don't expect a cheaper CPI like a hyper casual game, but they're willing to pay a premium price for acquiring a user with the intention that these users, based on the monetization, will be doing in-app purchases. So although as a game developer, your CPI might go higher to acquire a user compared to hyper casual, but your ROAS, that would be a new metric, not getting a cheaper user, but getting a user that would contribute to overall ROAS is a main KPI. So that would be something that would change in your day-to-day life as a developer moving from hyper casual to hybrid casual.
And you said ROAS, but ROAS for what day for when we're talking about hybrid?
So for hybrid casual games, since it's not as serious as a casual or a mid-core game, for example, you would still see kind of day 30 ROAS is something that is a very very common metric. Of course, over longer term, day 60, day 90, day 120 are more and more in demand as well. But you would see a stable rise in your ROAS. So day 14 is a good starting point. Day 30 is an ideal time where you would expect to hit those ROAS goals. Of course, over 100%.
Makes sense. Yeah, let's then talk about like specifics from the 2023 or maybe even early 2024. Can you highlight some of the hybrid casual titles that are on the market now?
Sure thing. So one of the leaders of this was Rovio, of course, that came out with Angry Birds too. So of course, growing up, everybody played Angry Birds, which was a very
Mm.
concept. And Rovio was one of the leaders in the public ecosystem that came up with the Angry Birds 2 as a concept for hybrid casual. Because initially in the days, while they were not a hybrid casual, they were more of a mid-core game. They still had things like leaderboards and scorecards, which they moved over to this new Angry Birds 2 as a genre, similar to Clash Royale, for example, right? They also enjoyed these features. So these are not too heavy on the user. I could be a user that loves hyper casual games. I could walk into Angry Birds 2 or Clash Royale, really fun games, really well done because they're backed by these big studios. And you start playing a game, and anytime you seem stuck at a level, you will not be obliged to do an in-app purchase. You could just hop on, watch a rewarded video, watch a rewarded ad.
Mm.
As a hyper casual or a casual player, you can just walk into these apps and really have fun. And these apps were actually on the leading board where you would follow all these others. So Rolik moved into the hybrid casual setup as well. Quali, they moved into hybrid casual publishing as well. Tap Nation moved into hybrid casual as well. So you see all these leading developers moving on to these steps. But I believe Angry Birds 2 is a great game that I think anybody that
Mm.
wants to see the basics of hybrid casual, it's fun to play with and you'd learn a lot.
Yeah, this is a very interesting perspective because we've started hearing about the hybrid only like for the past 2 years, I think, and usually it's like the games like Archero is like role model, right? But you are saying like, okay, hybrid was always there, right? Almost from the Angry Birds too.
It was right. So while the word hybrid casual might be new to the ecosystem, you always had gaming developers looking for alternative channels to kind of earn the revenue after having all these cuts that every time there is an in-app purchase you have to pay to Apple or Google, etc., for those in-app purchases. So something that would kind of trigger
Mm.
external monetization ways. Ads came into play accordingly, and when you found a good balance of games with had ads and the in-app purchase, voila, you had the hybrid casual setup. So once the big studios started doing it, and now hybrid casual can be done by any studio. Hence, I think it's a very, very common talking point that you don't need to be Rovio or Angry Birds to do this. You can be an indie developer and still focus on hybrid.
Mhm. Yeah, and that means that actually it's not hyper casual developers that started doing the hybrid. It was the other way around. The casual developers were starting
Exactly,
hybrid.
exactly, exactly. Because for hyper casual, kind of, it's usually easy to make a game, but when you start acquiring those users, that is where the main problem starts. And once you are somebody who has into mid-core and you want users that would play your game on a broader audience, that's where I think you would move to a hybrid casual setup.
Got it. We've also released a report on hyper and hybrid casual games. I'll just quickly share the screen now. Let me know if you had a chance to look at it.
I did see this report, right? And one thing that was very, very interesting was especially the place where you highlighted all these unique channels that the advertisers could possibly tap into, and also insights like, the CPI benchmarks. I think especially for developers that are moving in to this realm of things as well, right? Like one thing, I think one insight was regarding that iOS in Japan has one of the highest CPI benchmarks, but still it is the top 10 countries by ad spend in 23, right? So this was a very, very unique insight for us. I mean, we have seen this trend because usually advertisers like to pump money in tier one with US, UK, and all these countries. But kind of, I did see one more report that said that I think in 2024, almost 64% of the ad spend revenue will revolve around the Asia Pacific markets, right? So that is an insight
Mm,
that's very, very similar to what you had shared in the report, and I found it very, very interesting.
got it. Any comments around the ad network rankings or the ad types, or maybe something that you haven't seen here but you observed on your own?
So one thing that we did find, especially with our version of the hybrid casual analysis, was regarding the channels of acquisition, as you mentioned. So of course, app loving and all the leading channels that you have highlighted are the main go-to channels for any developer to test a hypothesis or for a soft launch. But as you grow that game, right, something that has been popping up very frequently is the new concept of a reward of playtime, which basically, while an offer wall would reward the user for a task, the rewarded playtime or the play to earn that App Samurai does, for example, rewards the user for the amount of time they invest in playing that game. So that is a channel that we have seen operate as a new channel for acquisition on top of all these successful channels that you have shared. So with the rewarded playtime, you can assure that the user would walk onto the app, and for every minute they spend inside the app, the chances of them purchasing an in-app package arises, right? So we have seen with this. So although these are CPIs are significantly higher, as you mentioned, but the ROAS LTVs are quite higher compared to an offer wall, because again, on an offer wall, you would bet on the user to complete certain tasks. So if you are a hyper casual, of course, offer wall works wonders. But once you are in the hybrid casual, or where your in-app purchases have significantly higher contribution to your revenue, you would want to make sure
Mhm.
that you're actually tracking the play time of the user as well, and basically motivating them with different kind of levels, different rewards, and of course leading to eventual purchases.
Got it. Let me quickly close this one. And I have a question about it. Like, is there like a lot of supply for this ad format? Because the most problematic thing is that I've been hearing is actually scaling. So it works okay for small scale, but once we want to scale more, then this is where like networks often underperform.
Definitely, Roman. So as you mentioned, it is something that has been very, very niche in the ecosystem. So while this concept hasn't been around as long as app loving or an offer wall concept, the reward play time has been around for the past 2.5 years, right? So
Mhm.
that's what we have seen. So with every day, the scale is constantly increasing, right? All the leading advertisers that were once doing just offer walls, and if they have higher in-app purchases, are moving to the rewarded playtime ecosystem, right? Players like App Samurai and other players are also contributing to the growth as well. So we see constant scale. Of course, now you would, again, any game developer that designs a game, the in-app purchase ratio differs. Now, of course, the spending power of somebody in a tier one country, let's say the US, UK, or Japan, is much more compared to a player in a tier three country to do the in-app purchase, right? So by default, the advertiser would focus on these regions to buy the in-app purchase, and for the tier 2 and tier 3 regions with ads, so they don't need to purchase, they can just watch the ads and contribute to the revenue, while the tier 1 countries are where you could actually bet on the users to make that purchase. Hence, with the inventory as well, as you mentioned, not many ad networks are capable of this. You need to have your own SDK like App Samurai to basically promote this channel and promote this inventory. So we are, of course, reaching that scale. We are not there yet, because it's kind of a niche product at the moment. But we definitely see potential, and we have heard from the advertisers as well that due to the high ROAS, they would constantly want more and more scale, which we are trying to achieve as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's an interesting point. And what about some other trends that you see for the hybrid casual games?
So one very common trend, as we spoke at the start, Roman, was that usually the advertisers are kind of a bit used to the lower CPIs that they come from the hyper casual, lower CPIs, lower LTVs. But in this world, one common trend we have seen is no longer keeping acquiring a low CPI user as a KPI, but right now all KPIs are oriented for your post install actions, for your LTVs, for your ROAS as well. So as you can see with this Scan 4.0 updates and the Google Privacy Sandbox, the ecosystem is also bound to see some fundamental changes. So I believe the whole hypothesis on, hey, if you're a gaming studio, get the cheapest CPI from Google and Facebook, and clanking those LTVs on day 7 and you're done. I think the focus will be left from there to try to reach your LTVs in day 30, day 45, day 60. So play the long
Mm,
game. So it's more like a marathon, not a sprint anymore for all the game developers, especially entering the hybrid casual space.
right. And it's so hard, also like talking from the experience of building all those reports, it's getting so much harder to do the benchmarks because, again, like how do you define hybrid? Like you're saying 60/40, 50/50 ad revenue in ad purchase split. But is it if it's like 70/30, should we still consider it 80/20, right? And everyone would have a different
Of
opinion.
course, of course, of course, of course. That's what that's the good part of the industry, right? It's a very very dynamic industry. No two baskets are exactly the same as well. The ideal opinion is that the in-app purchases between 40 to 50% and 50% is in-app purchase to in-app ads is a perfect fit. If you have higher in-app purchases, you would be basically considered as a mid-core or a casual gamer
Yeah.
of sorts as well. Your CPIs by default are higher, and as your ad revenue starts to increase, you'd be more on the hyper casual, because of course if your ad revenue increases, by default they are not earning you as much as an in-app purchase, hence that user's LTV decreases, hence your CPI tends to decrease. So you'd go back to the hyper casual with the increase in ads, and with the increase in in-app purchases you would skew slowly towards the
Yeah.
mid-core genre.
What about the predictions for 2024? Like it can be anything on the UA side, channels, ad type, scan, I don't know, whatever you have.
So a couple of pointers, right? So one thing, of course, in terms of the biggest regulations would be around the Scan 4.0 updates and the Google Privacy Sandbox, which basically goes into effect in May. So that will basically change a lot of things as well. We all have to wait and see. There is a lot of speculation, a lot of prediction, but only time will tell. Regarding the channels of acquisition, as I mentioned, the app loving, the DSPs, the offer walls, they are there and they have been there for legacy, right? But something new, as in terms of audio ads, is something that has been very very new. Same time, rewarded playtime is something that is very very new, and these deliver ROAS at a scale that the offer walls have not been able to deliver, just because of the nature of the game when the in-app purchases exceed a certain percentage. So you would pay for a higher CPI, and you'd basically get that LTV covered in day 30, for example. It's a kind of a new concept, and we are seeing more and more adoption, more and more hybrid casual games willing to spend that higher CPI, and the mid-core games willing to spend that higher CPI for a user that basically gives them higher LTV over the longer skew as well. And regarding one more thing would be regarding the genre of the game as well. So of course, in the initial, it has been the Q1 of Q24 has been almost come to an end. So RPG, party, match, casino, these kind of games are making quite the noise as well. Actually, there was a whole report by Data AI regarding RPG and match will actually fuel $1 of every $5 of aggregate growth in spending, right? So the amount of spend that is going to be increased for RPG and match is significantly increasing as well. Looking at App Samurai's current customer base, we do see that trend skewing that ways. So this could be probably an interesting genre of games to keep an eye on for 2024.
Got it. As a last one, do you have any tips, maybe one tip, the tip that you want to give to a hybrid casual developers?
So one thing, if you are very new and moving from, let's say, hyper casual to hybrid casual, one very important tip is the way you use these user acquisition channels as well. although the campaign types might look somewhat very similar, but the way you report back the data is extremely different as well, because right now you are trying to balance out in-app ads to in-app purchase as well. And of course you would have to optimize your game to be more incremental for these in-app purchase as well. So the same user that was once very comfortable with watching an ad should basically now kind of feel motivated to go ahead and make that purchase as well. So from building out those game dynamics to all the way from user acquisition and monetization mechanism, for developers moving into hybrid casual, I believe this is a very important factor, that you change your views of how you would position hyper casual and hybrid casual within the company itself, especially in terms of reporting.
Mm. Thanks a lot for him. That was very helpful. Please leave us a comment under this video if you have questions. We'll definitely answer them. Give us a like if you like this video. And see you in the next one.
Thank you very much. Bye
Yeah.
bye.
Cheers.